This is my music industry research task where I will be exploring if record labels and the parent company of the record labels actually increase the probability of success for an artist. So within this, I will be exploring trends within which record label goes with which artist and then which parent company owns each record label. But then I'll also be looking to see if certain record labels find more success from promoting certain types of artists, which can link back to Keith Negus's organic versus synthetic theory. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to head to my local Sainsbury's, which have a music section, and I'm going to see what artists are being sold. Let's go. Okay, so I'm here in Sainsbury's because I don't have any shops like HMV near me to be able to do this project, so I'm going to rely on Sainsbury's here. So looking at their charts right now, I believe their charts may be altered to fit the demographic of people who come and shop here at Sainsbury's, because a lot of the ones I'm seeing here are classic rock, 70s, 80s, 90s, country album, 80s, a lot of things like that. So I think that probably reflects the demographic of people who come to shop at Sainsbury's. But also looking at their charts, we can see very popular artists like Ed Sheeran in his new album. We've got Kylie as well. We also have Lewis Capaldi, Freya Ridings, and also some other well-known artists like BTS down here with some of their more special albums, as well as down here we have the classic Billie Eilish. We also can find George Ezra. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the albums that I find here and let's head back and talk about who produces them and which record labels. So something which I also found here at Sainsbury's is the brand new Now That's What I Call Music. So obviously this is the most recent version, it's the 103. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of the back of this and look up the individual songs as well, because the album charts are very different to the singles. So here you have songs like Senorita by Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello. You've got Old Town Road, which we did our lip sync to. We also have artists like Ariana Grande, Katy Perry, Avicii, Billie Eilish, Shawn Mendes, Sigala, Pink, Jess Glynne, Zara Larsson, the list goes on. So that's also going to be a really big help for me to see whether there is a dominating record label within this album, which obviously is very important because it is one of the best-selling albums in terms of compilations. So I'm going to have a deep look at that and I'll get back to you. So I'm back from Sainsbury's, and looking at the footage I just made, I think what they called their charts weren't actually charts because most of the CDs were compilations like 70s, 80s, so targeted towards a slightly older demographic, which, as I said earlier, may be a reflection of the shoppers at this particular Sainsbury's, or looking deeper into it, I actually found that it could be a reflection of the CD buyers as a whole. So looking online, I found that 61% of people who bought CDs in 2014 were aged 36 or older. I can't find a more recent statistic than that, but I can imagine that that is now a higher percentage with the rise of services like Spotify. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at online charts as well as the albums that I found in Sainsbury's to see if there are any links with the record labels, as I mentioned in my introductions, what I'm going to do. And the source for the online charts is going to be officialcharts.com, and I'll be looking at the UK only. So let's get started. So what I think I'm going to do in terms of getting my findings is I'm going to look at the albums that I found in Sainsbury's, check them up against what I find on the charts. Because of finding that the Sainsbury's one wasn't a chart, I probably won't use it as much as I would have liked to, which is a bit of a shame, but you know, that's how it is. But I will look at the album of the week and see if that does correlate. I will also be looking at, because today is the day where the official top charts changes, so it does the updated version. So I'm going to find the time in which they change, and I'm going to list down the old ones and then see if there are many changes for the new ones. So yeah, I'm going to do that and get back to you in a minute. Maybe longer than a minute. So I just spent ages going through all of the charts for the singles and albums, as well as seeing which ones were in Sainsbury's, which I'll get onto in a second. So I suppose I'm just going to tell you my findings and come to a conclusion. So first of all, for the singles for the UK, this was fairly varied actually. So I did the top 20, and what I did, I'll probably put a picture here. What I did was I listed in a chart the position on the charts, the name of the song, the artist, the label, and the parent company of the label. So here are my findings. So I found that 40% of the top songs are from Sony as a parent company. I'm focusing on parent companies here because I feel like there are so many little record labels that are owned by the mass companies that they're the ones that we really need to focus on. 30% are owned by Warner and 25% owned by Universal. And then there are also 3 that are independent. So either I couldn't find much information on them, or they have actually said that they are independent. So for example, there is AJ Tracy. He had said that he wanted to be independent and post it himself, and he did. And on my thing here, he is on position 6. And you can also see in the charts, which I am on here, this is the updated ones. You can see that Ed Sheeran is at the top, when actually if you look at my chart, I had Senorita at the top. So Senorita has actually dropped down to number 11. So this really does show, how quickly these numbers can drop for an artist. So it's great that Ed Sheeran has the 2 up there, and Ed Sheeran has done really, really well in the industry at the moment. So he is run by Warner and Sony with the record labels Asylum and Columbia. So he's done really, really well with his collaboration album 6. We'll get on to more about that later in the album section. But for the most part, the updated charts are pretty much the same. There are a few little sort of swapping over of songs in the list, but it's pretty much the same people kind of up there. So you've got Sam Smith, number 8. Here I had Sam Smith, number 7. So again, pretty much very similar here, which does show that as much as there are some drastic changes, there are also just some subtle. And you can actually see on the right-hand side where it says WOC, that means weeks on chart. So a few of these people, for example, AJ for Ladbroke Grove, he's been on the charts for 26 weeks, so good for him there, brilliant. Now on to the official albums. So for the albums, I found that this one was quite interesting, having done the singles first, because it actually gave me a direct comparison as to what I believe the mass companies are targeting towards their music. So for this, it was equal 35% and 35% between Warner and Universal. And then Sony only had 10%, with having only 2 albums in the top 20 for the UK. So what that kind of tells me is that Sony must be focusing more on the singles market and getting their artists up within the singles charts rather than the albums. So obviously there's some kind of strategy going on there, because it does seem very odd that Sony only has 2 albums in the top 100 charts. But again, similar to the singles, the charts are fairly similar in terms of the normal people. George Ezra, Billie Eilish are up there, Lewis Capaldi, Ed Sheeran has dropped down 1. And in Sainsbury's, they had Ed Sheeran as the album of the week, so they got that very accurate. Good job, Sainsbury's. But we also had the new entry of Taylor Swift with Lover, which I believe is a new record in China on the release of that. But she's done really well, and she has done hers through Republic Records, the famous record label, through Universal. So good for her there. And then a new one at number 5 as well with Music X Road. And that was Relentless from Sony. So even the new additions, this is really good at showing us that the new additions to the charts are still the mass companies. So I suppose in terms of what I was proposing at the introduction to do with does it constitute towards success, here you can say that it does. But what I would say the argument is that there are also 2 independent and 2 unknown, but I think we can call them independent, within the album charts as well. So I suppose there's an argument there saying that, well, people are making it up to the top while being part of independent record labels and not part of the mass record labels. So I suppose there's an argument there. But for the most part, we can agree that being part of a mass company like Warner, Universal, Sony, what used to be EMI but is now Warner, as part of the big three now rather than being big four, it really does make an impact for an artist. And then I also looked at the Spotify charts, but I had found that with the Spotify charts, it was, as you can see here, it's very similar to what the other charts are. So obviously, because the official top 100 charts I've been looking at are somewhat based on the downloads and the streams, so it's no surprise to me that this is very similar. And it's also no surprise to me that the top ones are people like Shawn Mendes here, Ed Sheeran again, Sam Smith, Lewis Capaldi, the usual people that we'd expect to be up there sort of for what's modern, what's new at the time. So good for them staying at the top. And little bonus little looking up. I mentioned when I was in Sainsbury's that I would have a look at, now that's what I call Music 103. Not really thinking at the time how long it would take to go through each individual song and look up their record label and the parent company. But I did it anyway. So you can see my charts, and there's a time lapse of me. So the time lapse that you're currently watching is of me just doing CD 2. So I split it up into two, but the percentages are for both albums combined. So we have the usual songs in there. You've got Old Town Road, you've got Bad Guy, you know, the typical songs that everyone's hearing on the radio at the moment. But what I found incredibly interesting about Now That's What I Call Music is that 52% of the songs in this year's Now That I Call Music were from Universal. And in the track order, I did these all in track order. Sometimes there were songs, 5 tracks, all by Universal put together. I don't know if this was some strategy. So for example, the very first, tracks 3 to about 7, I think, are all Universal together on the first album. I don't know if this is something strategic done by Universal, or whether the company who makes Now That I Call Music have some kind of preference towards Universal, if it's just coincidence. But 52% of a huge selling album each year is a good amount for Universal. Now Warner, they had 18.8% of the albums, and Sony had 27%. And there was 1 out of the 44 tracks that was independent. So that's still pretty good to being an independent record label and getting on Now That's What I Call Music. I suppose I would see that as a bit of an achievement. So congratulations to Fashion Week with the record label Gifted Music. So I think this really does show us, in terms of what I was proposing at the beginning, that the record label that you're part of does make quite a big difference. And I'm finding that the more organic artists are the ones by the more obscure record labels. And the ones that have really been built up are by, the usuals. So I think we really can tell that it does matter who you're with, but it may affect your image if you're an artist looking to getting a contract with one of these big record labels. Particular record labels that I'd point out from Now That's What I Call Music are companies like RCA, which is Sony. You've got Polydor, which is Universal, but is apparently quite an old record label company. So great for them for being part of such a big company now and doing so well. You also have Virgin and Virgin EMI. So what I found with Virgin EMI is some of that was from songs from Rocket Man. So that's pretty good for Taron Egerton and obviously Elton John. We can also point out Parlophone from Warner. They've done very well as well. Columbia as well, we've seen a couple of times. Republic. Universal has sometimes put themselves in as the record label and then themselves as the parent company. So And then we also have Interscope. Interscope have done very well as well, again being linked to Rocket Man, but also being linked to artists like Sam Fender. There should be another one here. Billie Eilish was their big one. So Interscope have done very well by by having her there. So yeah, I think we can come to the proper conclusion that being part of the record label is quite a big deal, and it can affect it, but there are a small percentage of independent artists and independent record labels that do get up there. They do make it on Now That's What I Call Music. They do make it on the charts, and you know, they're holding their own. So there you go. That was my music industry research task. I hope you've enjoyed it. I definitely feel like I put a lot of work and effort into this, so I really hope you have enjoyed it. And yeah, see you for the next one.